Bonjour, nedina wemak. Anin Gabi Delan Dijnika Makwadudam, Sandy Bay Nunja, Winnipeg Dunja, Treaty 1 Dunja. My English name is Jason Whitford. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at End Homelessness Winnipeg, and I'm also a proud board member of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, where I've been for the past 3 years, and I get the opportunity, the privilege of moderating this session here today. One of my tasks. I'm happy to do so. What a turnout this conference has been. This is the third session on Indigenous housing, ways of doing, solutions by our women and community members. We'll have 3 presentations that are going to be provided over the next hour and a half. We're trying to make up some time that was lost there during lunch hour. This session highlights the major successes and importance of Indigenous-led supports, programs and housing solutions that are led by Indigenous women and community members. In this session, you will learn about these 3 unique programs that are central in addressing homelessness prevention and strengthening housing security with various Indigenous communities. The first presentation is Connecting for the Dream, Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound by Karolyn, the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centers. And the second one is Constructing Ecological, Modular, and Passive Building Systems with Indigenous-led Social Enterprise, which will be delivered by Colleen, Keepers of the Circle. And the third session, which will be a group presentation on ongoing dialogue, Wîhcihaw Maskokamik Society, an Indigenous agency that operates an emergency shelter, and the City of Edmonton's Emergency Shelter Best Practice Guide. And that will be delivered by Jared, Blake, and Corey. Glory, sorry. Yeah, that must be Cree. Those words must be Cree. I'm working on pronunciation, but I'm more familiar with Anishinaabe. So welcome everyone, and I look forward to listening to the presentations. Yeah, so we'll start with Karolyn. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to learn about the variety of programs. I'm Karolyn Harris, the Senior Program Advisor for Housing and Homelessness at the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centers, or only slightly shorter, the OFIFC. As Jason mentioned, I'm here to talk about the Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound program, kind of what it is, where it comes from, some of the challenges it's facing, and most of all, the impact of the program, not only right now for this generation, but for generations to come. But first, I'd like to take a quick poll, if that's all right. By a show of hands, who knows what a friendship center is? I like that. Lots of hands, good to see, that's what I like to see. But for those without their hands up, I just want to very briefly go into what a friendship center is and kind of what they do. Friendship centers started as social gathering spaces as Indigenous people moved into cities and have grown to become urban Indigenous service hubs, which are so pivotal since almost 90% of Indigenous people in Ontario do live in cities. Friendship centers now have programs that span across all sectors, so food insecurity, housing, employment, childcare, court work. They have programs tailored for infants, programs tailored for seniors, and every stage of the life cycle in between. Friendship centers were and are created by and for the local Indigenous community, and also they also serve as a collective voice of that community. So the OFIFC's goal then is to act as a collective voice of all friendship centers across Ontario, and to advocate for all friendship centers across Ontario. There are over 120 friendship centers across Canada, with 31 in Ontario. A third-party consultation was actually just completed this past summer to show exactly how valuable friendship centers and friendship center staff are to Ontario communities. This PowerPoint will be made available to everyone, and I've included a link to that report on the last slide. That report also highlights how underfunded and often undersupported friendship centers are, considering all the work they do for communities, and not just Indigenous communities either. Friendship centers often support community members regardless of indigeneity, because there might not be any other service options in their community, or because mainstream service providers will often refer to friendship centers because they know that that center will find some way to help that community member. And for more information on friendship centers and the broader community and housing supports they provide, I recommend attending the Friendship Centers on the Front Line of the Housing Crisis presentation. That's part of the Indigenous Homelessness Prevention session this time tomorrow. But Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound is such a good representation of the growing friendship center movement because it is truly a holistic, culture-based, community-led program. Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound, or UIHB, is a 4-year program that supports sole parenting Indigenous mothers through their education to employment journey. It's specifically designed to address each of the barriers Indigenous mothers face when trying to go back to school and find meaningful employment. So addressing these barriers involves ensuring families have access to stable housing, culturally relevant childcare, transportation, academic and mental health supports, and often, most importantly, one-on-one case counseling over the 4 years. These wraparound supports are provided over those 4 years in a 4-phased approach. It's kind of broken down here. In the first phase, when mothers enter the program, it's all about stabilization and creating a sense of safety for them and their children. Step 1, of course, is ensuring that family has access to that safe, stable housing, as well as childcare and mental health supports. Of course, only once our immediate needs are met can we even begin to start thinking about our long-term goals, let alone taking steps to actually achieve them. Part of phase 1 is also skills development. The OFIFC worked with friendship centers to create a 12-week life skills curriculum for UIHB clients, covering everything from budgeting, time management, to setting boundaries and healthy relationships. The first phase can also involve academics assessments and upgrading, credit counseling, criminal record expungement, and whatever else a family needs to be set up for success. So actually the goal of phase 1 is to make sure the mothers are ready for everything that comes next, specifically in phase 2, when they go to post-secondary. In phase 3, clients are then graduating from post-secondary and beginning to prepare for work. This could mean securing an internship, on-the-job training, working on a resume and interview skills to prepare them for phase 4, where they're actively job seeking, gaining employment, and transitioning out of the program. That said, every friendship center is different, every individual is different, so this phased approach here is just an example, not so much a template, as everyone's journey will be different. But this 4-year, 4-phased, wraparound urban Indigenous service model is actually a modified version of Toronto-based service provider Woodgreen's Homeward Bound program. For a long time, friendship centers have identified that single-parent families, and specifically single-mother families, face the most barriers when attempting to go seek education and employment and long-term stability. But the original visioning process for urban Indigenous Homeward Bound began back in 2012, when the OFIFC recognized an alignment between Woodgreen's Homeward Bound model and the holistic supports friendship centers already offer. So the OFIFC and Woodgreen began working with communities to develop an understanding of the unique context of each friendship center and see the potential relevance of adapting that mainstream Homeward Bound model to local Indigenous communities. It was friendship centers, though, who then created a collective vision and brought it out to their communities and secured the partnerships that are so pivotal to a wraparound support model like this. And so the Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound program welcomed its first participants back in 2018 with the overarching program goal of disrupting cycles of poverty to create intergenerational well-being and prosperity for Indigenous families. Now, through this modification process, there are still many similarities between Woodgreen's Homeward Bound and Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound, but UIHB is unique in 2 main ways. It's both culture-based and more flexible than the mainstream Homeward Bound model. UIHB provides access to culture, and ceremony is embedded within already existing Friendship Center programming. As you can see by the UIHB healing continuum here, culture is both the foundation and support for everything UIHB does. From a client's intake to their graduation, their whole journey is both directed and supported by culture. Some of you may have even noticed for bonus points that it's modeled after the medicine wheel as it begins in the east as a client begins their UIHB journey. So flowing from this cultural core, the second differentiating factor is that urban Indigenous Homeward Bound is much more flexible. Since Wood Green's Homeward Bound is kind of the same in each community and a bit more prescriptive. For example, there's only 5 post-secondary courses or programs that clients can apply for. Well, UIHB clients can apply for any program they want and they have access to in their community. And because UIHB was adapted to meet the needs of each community, it is, again, unique at every Friendship Center. So the program is currently running out of 7 Friendship Centers, shown here in red, with programs in Dryden, Sault Ste. Marie, Peterborough, Hamilton, Niagara, Fort Erie, and London. Again, each of these centers created their own vision, built community partnerships, and essentially designed their own program. This means that while the general UIHB model is the same, holistic supports, 4 phases, 4 years, how the program runs day to day and the specific supports each Friendship Center offers through UIHB can be very different. This is probably the most noticeable around housing. The 2 more northern sites, Dryden and Sault Ste. Marie, were able to create transitional housing specifically for UIHB families. So when they enter the program, they enter UIHB housing. Here you can see some examples. Sorry, I'm going laptop and I'm two laptopping it here. The City of London also recently broke ground on an Indigenous housing complex that will have designated units for UIHB families. And so this is a long-term goal at every UIHB center, not just for the housing itself, for the sense of community it allows to build. In the meantime, sites without housing continue to support UIHB families to find and secure housing, normally subsidized through the program. Because UIHB provides such comprehensive supports, creating a robust, sustained partnership network is essential. Some key partnerships include municipal social services and local governments, such as DSAB or Ontario Works, not-for-profit housing providers, specifically Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services, which were instrumental in building the UIHB housing in both Dryden and Sault Ste. Marie and soon London. Childcare providers, it's about 50-50 UIHB sites that deliver the childcare through the Friendship Center or sites that, through community partnerships, have secured childcare subsidies for UIHB children, as well as local post-secondary institutions. All UIHB sites have a good relationship with their local college and their Indigenous Service Department specifically. Phase 1 often includes going to their local college, kind of getting a tour, just so that the clients feel more comfortable when they're eventually going to classes. But key partnerships also include employers for internships and sometimes interview prep, as well as community members, leaders, and elders to provide that comprehensive culture-based support system. Because Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound is a Friendship Center program, but it's also a community program. UIHB wouldn't be what it is, wouldn't be able to do what it does without a strong, sustained partnership network. But now that we've talked about how community provides sustained support to UIHB, I guess we should talk about the sustained support the program has from government funders. Oh wait, there aren't any. What? Because UIHB is still relatively new and it's so cross-sectoral, I guess the real issue being it's so cross-ministerial in the supports it provides, housing, childcare, post-secondary, mental health. No one ministry has agreed to sustainably fund the program yet. We're still relying on short-term piecemeal funding and are always looking for and applying for new sources of funding. The goal, fingers crossed, is to stabilize the 7 existing UIHB programs and hopefully have it grow to every Friendship Center across Ontario, across Canada maybe even grow it to support single-father families, But we can't even begin to think of those possibilities until the 7 UHB sites as they are now are secure, and that means secure ongoing funding. This year we've received funding from the National Indigenous Collaborative Housing Inc., or NICHI, which is amazing, but it only lasts for 1 year. The main funder of UHB for the past few years has been Apatsuan, another friendship center program that supports employment, education, and kind of skills development more broadly. The program can offer some of the wraparound supports as they relate to education or employment, such as childcare or transportation, but they tend to be more targeted and short-term, allowing Apatsuan to support more community members. We are continually having to pull money from Apatsuan, which we are very thankful for. But this does strain the 30-plus other Apatsuan sites across Ontario and is now limiting the number of community members that program can support. One of the reasons that this lack of funding can be so frustrating is not just the impact that's impacting programs like Apatsuan, which it is. And it's not just because the impact that UHB is already making is incredible, which it also is. But it's the fact that we've already shown that UHB is the less expensive option. Back in 2019, the OFIFC performed a cost-benefit analysis on the program, and as you can see here, supporting UHB is more than 5 times less expensive than the status quo. This means that it's 5 times cheaper to meaningfully support families to achieve their own goals and their own prosperity through this Indigenous community-led solution. And this amount only takes into account the mothers themselves. But when you help one family rise up, their children rise up, their children's children rise up, the investment into this generation to support UHB is not only fiscally responsible in the short term, the investment pays dividends generationally by disrupting cycles of poverty. That is why, in the truest sense of the word, Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound is reconciliation in action. Now, this return on investment is on top of the fact that UHB aligns with many government priorities and mandates, of course, including the calls for justice for the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Here's a few examples of how Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound supports the calls for justice, and I would just like to highlight the phrase ensures equitable access to basic rights such as employment, housing, education, safety, and childcare, because that is exactly what Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound does. And by doing that, it also adheres to so many provincial and federal priorities. It both addresses, maybe it needs to be updated, it's fine. It both addresses and prevents chronic homelessness, supports Indigenous women's leadership, and ends cycles of gender-based violence by building partnerships to ensure access to childcare and quality job training. In Ontario, the UHB strengthens the economy, improves individuals' connection to the labor market, reduces long-term reliance on social assistance, prevents violence in Indigenous communities, and reduces red tape. When we look at each individual ministry's mandates, UHB can support in almost all of them. I'm going to go through them real quick, but as a reminder, the PowerPoint will be shared in case you're one of these ministers by chance and you want to get a kudos at work. I mean, all this said, the governments change, mandates and priorities change, but with impacts as far-reaching as Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound, the program will continue to ally with any future government mandates. I mean, reconciliation broadly is cited across the political spectrum as a priority, but usually with very little explanation on what that looks like. It looks like this. It looks like disrupting intergenerational cycles of poverty. It's again, just to restate, it is in fact reconciliation. I couldn't even say it twice. It is reconciliation in action. Because UHB has only been running for less than 6 years through a global pandemic, I would like to add, and the impact the program is making is unbelievable. So far, the program has 20 graduates, and another 20 women are graduating from the program this year alone. That's not just 20 individuals. That is 20 families on a different life path than they were 4 years ago when they entered the program. And people are taking notice. Oh, there we go. Yes, that was also a PowerPoint joke. But these are just some of the issues. Some of the articles written about urban Indigenous Homeward Bound. Every day there are stories of UIHB successes, big and small, because a UIHB success isn't only measured at graduation. There are so many, I can't even say small successes, because they really are huge, kind of getting your high school diploma, balancing a budget, being accepted into college, passing your first test. These are really life-changing successes that need to be celebrated. But honestly, the biggest success, and the one I hear most often, is the change in perspective of the mothers and their children as they go throughout the program. Learning that it's okay to ask for help and accept it when it's offered. That's okay to say no. It's okay to fail as long as we keep trying. And most importantly, learning to love themselves. Multiple past and present UIHB mothers have said that this program allowed them to believe in themselves and love themselves. And this knowledge doesn't stay with the mother. It's passed on to their children. Again, we're only 6 years in to running a 4-year program, and the impact on the next generation is already clear. The stability offered through the program has allowed mothers to regain custody of their children. Children of UIHB mothers are now entering university when finishing high school wasn't likely when they enter the program. We're seeing young women learning from the examples of their mothers, accessing the supports necessary to leave abusive relationships so they can refocus on their own education goals. So it's probably a good time to emphasize that Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound is not a housing program. It's an education to employment program. I'll say it again, it's a reconciliation program that disrupts intergenerational cycles of poverty, because I didn't realize I had it so many times in my notes. But it does this by addressing the barriers to success, one of which is access to safe housing. Here are just a few statements from past and present UIHB mothers. But what do these mothers credit for getting them out of a dark place, changing their lives, helping them fulfill their dreams? When UIHB families talk about the impact the program has had on their lives, the housing support is rarely the first thing they talk about, even though the program couldn't exist without housing. Housing is a necessary but not sufficient part of stability and prosperity. Because UIHB families talk about the staff every time. The Friendship Center staff who support them to cross every hurdle they faced along the 4-year journey, kind of both unexpected and expected. And along 4 years, that's a lot of unexpected hurdles. The Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound program starts with ensuring families have safe, stable housing through holistic supports geared to meet that family's needs, allowing them to achieve their goals. The program ends with that family creating a home. That's what the program does, and that's why it's called Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound. It allows families to create a home, their home. And that's, I'm assuming, a big part of why we're all here, to figure out how to support our communities to find or create a home. So much of housing and homelessness work is about direct intervention today, getting that person a house, saving their life today. UHB does do that with the recognition that it takes both community work and time to equip people to stay housed and achieve their own definitions of prosperity, and to allow future generations to do the same. So as we near the end of our first day of the conference to end homelessness, I want to reinforce that we don't have to choose between short-term and long-term solutions. We desperately need both, and Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound shows that we can do both. But we need to shift our perspective of what a housing program is, of what it needs to be, and we need to deliver the ongoing investment to support it. That's all I got. Hoppas det var svämt.
Great presentation, Karolyn. We're now call up Colleen. Is your last name Carpenter, or are you a carpenter?
Both.
She's going to talk about modular, ecological, modular, and passive building systems.
I'm old school. Wîhcihaw Maskokamik, Colleen Carpenter, Ecological. I'm an off-reserve member of Attawapiskat First Nation Treaty 9 territory. I want to just say that I am a storyteller, and I will tell a little bit about myself and my family. I honor them because it was their strength that led me here today. And then I will trickle on into what I'm up to. So, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about some of my stories of lived experience of housing insecurity and homelessness. I grew up in a family of 5, and I honor today both my late parents, Toby Matthews and Anastasia Carpenter, who were residential school survivors, and along my 2 siblings, Judy Martin and Samantha Matthews. I say our names because we were one of many families out there who suffered homelessness, insecurity, with food, racism, entities of power. By that I mean like child welfare system, education systems. Growing up, my parents taught us to lie, to protect our family. When we would attend these schools, there were many times when we would have to stay at home because we had no lunch. Or if we showed up with not much, they would notice. I remember wanting to save my lunch to help my parents so that they would not have to do groceries. And I remember a teacher asking me why I'm not eating. I remember saying that I wasn't hungry. And she forced me out into the hallway and made me eat my food until I got sick. I remember crying and wondering why she was so forceful about it. And there were times it was scary to be asked if everything at home was okay, because sometimes they would make you tell the truth. We were always scared as a family, wondering how we would survive any of this. We would live in old motel rooms when we couldn't afford it. There would be times we'd go along with family members who were fortunate enough to have vehicles and bring us to the bush and live off the land. And that was a place we were most happy and felt safe because there were no eyes on us or no one to take us away because we were far out there. I want to speak about a time we got evicted from a place where the landlord handed my father a sleeping bag to keep us girls warm, and we were lucky enough to have a tent, so we slept out on the outskirts of that city. It was Thunder Bay. My eldest sister had noticed the fear and tears of my father, a man who never showed fear or weakness, terrified that he might just lose his family. But we fought really hard to stay together. My father had also learned how to carve animals from cedar wood, a skill that was taught to him from my mom's brother, a means of making some money to feed us or to save for rent for another month, a way of survival. I remember every single carving because I was with him with every single one of them. I'd watch him carve. And he would try to leave early and go sell them. Whew. And I would be there with him, his daughter at a young age, worrying about money at about 5 years old. I remember him always trying to wake up early so that I didn't go with him, like I was saying, because there were really long days with no food sometimes, but I was determined. And I remember waking up and he was gone one morning and I was mad. I got dressed so fast and chased him because I knew where he would walk to go sell his carvings. I chased him on my bicycle. He was so far away, but I remember feeling the need to help my family, and then I wiped out. He heard me crying, and he ran to me. He ran so fast, and he said, "You can't come, Dennis. It'll be a long day." I said, "I don't care. I want to help you." He saw the stubbornness in me and knew I'd follow him anyway. So we went on our day, and I remember trying to hide tears outside restaurants because I was hungry. I would smell the food, but I showed strength and we kept going. And I will never forget the times he would sell something. The carving would not be in his hands, and he'd come out with the biggest smile on his face and relief that he could feed his girls. He would make about $40 to $80 depending on what the carving was. He would make loons, otters, eagles. And I remember when he would sell something, he would ask if I wanted candy, and I would say no. "Let's buy food, Dad, and show Mom our money." As a family, on our good days, I remember walking down neighborhoods and we would pretend that the houses were ours. And my parents would also talk about us girls going to school to get an education to survive this world. And I remember those talks of hopes and dreams and them telling us to never give up. And that if anything did ever happen to them, for us sisters to take good care of each other, and we do to this day. I am a single mother to my daughter, Emily. She has been my inspiration and determination to do good in this world. I have come a very long way. I used to believe I was only capable of cleaning jobs, because those were the jobs I did, or waitressing. I never dared to complete my education, as an education figure told me that there was no use in me trying. As I was evaluated, then told my IQ was so low, there was no point. Imagine that. Someone who was supposed to help you, guide you, and teach you shot me down. I cried walking home, confirming to myself that I'm not smart, not talented, not sure how I will survive this world, and how am I to take care of my daughter. But I keep the words of my parents to never give up. They sure as hell did not give up on us, so I won't either. I'll figure it out. I thank Creator for giving me the life and hard path we were given, as that made me a strong and stubborn and determined woman today. I moved to Kirkland Lake and have met some amazing people at Keepers of the Circle. I formed a quick bond with an inspiring woman who encouraged me to go get my education, and I had told her what had happened with my attempt. She was furious with how someone with that power tell someone or make you believe that it wasn't possible. So she encouraged me. I had a bit of a struggle and it felt scary and impossible, but I graduated and got my grade 12. A piece of paper I didn't know that carried so much meaning to it. To me, that just showed anything is possible, and that it takes really hard work, bravery, because I am scared right now, speaking in front of everybody. Excuse me. Yes, and I thank my daughter, as she always encourages me, her love and having that belief in me that I can do anything. So thank you for listening to those stories. Those are a very living piece of me every day. And thank you for making this space feel really safe for me to tell you that. So I'd like to share this journey on this work I'm involved in. I work with Keepers of the Circle, and I'm going to try and do these slides. I would like to share the journey that I just said that. I work with Keepers of the Circle, an urban Indigenous hub operated by the Temiskaming Native Women's Support Group, a nonprofit organization established in 1997 to support political, social, and economic equality of Indigenous women and wellness of their families and communities. Keepers of the Circle is an Ontario representative of the Native Women's Association of Canada, NWAC, with 2 sites on the with 2 sites in Temiskaming Shores and 1 in Kirkland Lake. Our organization is guided by our wisdom keepers, composed of elders of First Nations within our geographic territory. Along my journey with keepers, I was introduced to a beautiful group of elders, and I had formed a very close bond to George and Lillian Etier. I honor them today because these two has made a huge impact in my life, and this project as well. So here are photos. Who knows how to read a measuring tape? See, yeah, that was me too. But we were able to build and construct these panels. And that just shows again that you don't need all kinds of papers or school. You just need your hands and your talent and just the belief that you can do this. So, and these women here are all green to the trade, and we all learn together. And as I speak today, they are currently down building panels as we speak. So in 2022, Keepers of the Circle, oh my God, there we go, launched a pilot program where we brought 6 Indigenous women who had no previous experience with construction together and delivered modular construction training. Over the course of 3 months, these women were able to build panels for a 480 square foot modular passive off-grid home and installed it in over the course of 3 days. And I will add that this was in the middle of winter on the coldest snap, followed by a blizzard. And this off-grid home is my home. I'm connected to the land, and it was a way of me honoring my parents and continuing that knowledge and passing it down to my daughter that you can do anything is what the message is. And to everyone who was on a similar path of hardships, I want to be an inspiration that you could do the impossible. And there's me looking up like I'm what is going on. So this is my little home. It's a 20 by 24 modular passive cabin. And just want to point out, like, each of these are separate panels, and I think in total is about 38 or 28. I don't even know my own house, but that was our day, and I can't believe we were able to do that in the conditions. It just shows that anything really is possible. So we are building on the success of this project and currently in the process of constructing an Indigenous woman-led modular construction factory in Kirkland Lake. That will construct prefab. I am so sorry, guys. My mouth is so dry. Prefabricated panels for the homes and community buildings across Northern Ontario. This facility will also be a year-round training center for our local community members. And I have, so that's just speaking about the panels. Those are the photos of all these brave women. So this is the design of our factory. This is what we're going to bring to the north. Pretty incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we are to erect these buildings by, again, winter. So again, we have led a team for the second time, and as I spoke, they are down south right now, constructing the supportive building, which is this building here, which I'm proud to say I've built half that place, along with these people. Thank you. And how our panels will be built in our factory. So this will be the factory right here. I think this one. So we'll have high-performance machinery and equipment for timber construction. So we estimate when running at full capacity, we will be shooting up like 100 homes a year. Yes. I'm very proud of contributing to this project, along with my colleagues, elders. Again, this all came from ideas and dreams and hard work and a lot of tears and sore hands. But this is what we're striving for. I suck at conclusions, but this is it.
That was amazing. Very, very inspiring. Last but not least, our third presentation will be delivered by Glory, Blake, and Jared. It's ongoing dialogue. Wîhcihaw Maskokamik Society.
Yes. Good job. There we go. So I click right here. Okay. Before we begin, we would like to recognize that we are here today on the unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. We acknowledge the many Indigenous people who come to this conference every year. Tanse, my name is Glory. My Cree name is Wîhcihaw. I am an Enoch Cree Nation band member. Enoch in Cree is Muskegosuk, which means land of the medicine. Enoch is 5 minutes west of Edmonton in Alberta. I come from a long line of strong Cree women. I am the first female Indigenous executive director in Enoch. This is Enoch's first non-for-profit society that has stepped into an urban setting. I am joined today by Blake Jackman with Native Counseling Services of Alberta and Jared Abbott with the City of Edmonton. Welcome to our session. We are pleased to provide you with a presentation of Enoch Cree Nation's Wîhcihaw Maskokamik Society, an Indigenous agency that operates an emergency shelter, Maskokamik, and the City of Edmonton's Emergency Shelter Best Practice Guide. In today's session, I'm very nervous. In today's session, we will give an overview of the current emergency shelter and the Indigenous unhoused situation in Edmonton. We will provide you with an overview of Maskokamik, which in English translates to bear lodge. Blake and I will then describe some of the lessons we have learned during the operation of Maskokamik. And finally, I will turn things over to Jared to provide a quick overview of how the City of Edmonton leveraged those lessons learned in their updated emergency shelter best practice guides. And then we will end with key takeaways. So here we have some quotes from guests that have stayed at Maskokamik. So I just want to share a little bit of what Wîhcihaw Maskokamik means. So anything I do, just a little bit of history of me. I've 13 years in recovery. The basis of who I am and what has helped me in my life to be a good mom, to be sober, to do the work I do is ceremony. So anything I do in the work that I do, I always go to ceremony. So I have created 2 other programs for Enoch. Both of those names have come from ceremony. So it was just natural to do that with this. And so Wîhcihaw Maskokamik means everyone gets help at the Bear Lodge. So that's the name of the society. So it was just fitting that we call the shelter Maskokamik, which just breaks down to Bear Lodge. just know that on paper it is called a shelter, but we don't call it a shelter. We know that history is that the word shelter is a very dirty word, and it's a place of trauma, and it's a feeling of being unsafe. So we don't use the word shelter. If we have to use the word, we use the word emergency lodging. But when we ask or we are referring to our space, it is Maskokamik. So Maskokamik is the first Indigenous-run emergency shelter in the city of Edmonton. You also hear us reference the word unhoused. So I know that here at the conference and in other settings, people use the word homeless or use the word unhoused. So in my life, I've been unhoused. So we don't use the word homeless or houseless because that word less means when you're referring to somebody that they are less than. And just because they don't have somewhere to live or they're going through something doesn't mean that they're not people just like me and you. So when we refer to them, we don't call them homeless or houseless. We call them unhoused. So you'll see us reference that in the slides. Okay. So we are the first Indigenous shelter in the city of Edmonton, and we are the second Indigenous shelter in the province of Alberta. The benefits of an Indigenous-run site is that staff, programming, and shelters are tailored to the population. It provides a similar environment for how people grew up, with the language being spoken, the sights, the smells, the smudge, even to the drawings on the wall. When people have come, we call them our guests. We don't call them clients. We don't call them participants. And when I was asked to take on this project, and I don't even want to call it a project. It's my passion. People have asked me, what led me to do the work that I do. It chose me. I didn't choose it. It chose me. So what I refer back to is when I lived at my cook'em's house, when people would come over and she'd say, Uncle so-and-so is coming, he's our guest, so we're gonna give him tea and we're gonna make sure he, has a room and it's clean and you treat him as such, right? He's not here for a long time, but you treat them. They're your guest, right? So it just came fitting for me and creating the policies and all the Western documents that everybody needs to get funding. We call them our guests, and the staff there are our guest support workers. So this is the kind of feedback that I receive. We also speak to the changes in language, so shelter versus emergency lodging, gathering space, client versus guest. The relationship between the guests and the staff is characterized by a shared history and shared experience. Shared experience in learning and growing. The shared experience of being Indigenous enables staff to connect with guests in the frame of reference, demonstrated empathy, understanding, and provide authentic hope to guests that they can overcome challenges in their lives. So here we'll give a little bit of stats. Edmonton is one of the largest urban Indigenous populations in Canada. While only 6% of Edmonton's population is Indigenous, according to the stats through Homeward Trust Edmonton, Edmonton's unhoused system planner organization, over 55% of Edmonton's unhoused population identifies as Indigenous. Even though a significant amount of Edmonton's unhoused population identifies as Indigenous, very few of the emergency shelter spaces in Edmonton are Indigenous-led or operated. Edmonton has seen some shelter improvements over the last number of years. We have considerably more permanent 24/7 spaces and are seeing a greater diversity of shelter operators and bed options. within the emergency shelters, with women-only spaces, newcomer spaces, and Indigenous-led and operated spaces. Finally, as shelter jurisdiction can vary from province to province, we wanted to flag that Enoch Cree Nation Chief and Council provided the project support and approval to move forward. Additionally, in Alberta, the Government of Alberta funds, regulates, and monitors all emergency shelters, while the City of Edmonton supports the continuous improvement of emergency shelters. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this. So this was community driven by the guests. This is something that is up on the wall. They actually came and asked if it was something they could do, and they wanted to show their feelings and put it down on paper and what Maskokamik meant to them. So I really want to share it because it's a beautiful thing. It was all them and how they feel about Maskokamik and what it means to them. So officially, Maskokamik opened January 8th, 2024. Enoch Cree Nation and Native Counseling Services. Native Counseling Services provides us with the Housing First team, as where Enoch Cree Nation operates the emergency shelter. We are very proud of the work being done through the Wîhcihaw Maskokamik Society. The site operation is owned and operated by Enoch Cree Nation. Maskokamik has 100 beds available with 24/7 intake and operation. So during the day, I think that maybe in the past, some shelters have maybe kicked guests out during the day and then they have to come back in the evening. That's no longer happening. People can stay. There's 24/7 intake. As long as we have beds available, the guests can come. The site does support and prioritize Enoch band members, but we are open to anybody who's 18 and older, and anybody from the general population. Our services include 3 meals a day, snack in the evening. We have showers, we have on-site housing supports, cultural supports, and community resources, pharmacy supports, staff and security. Diversity is encouraged at Maskokamik. We support people with all walks of life, all races, all genders. Everyone is welcome. A decolonized approach is very important for how Maskokamik was developed and operated. This includes an Indigenous perspective in the way we deliver our programs and services. This includes being grounded in the 7 sacred teachings, with a shout out to the Anishinaabe people who originated the 7 sacred teachings. We wanted to take some time to talk about some of the approaches that we are taking and some of the outcomes to date. I will turn it over to Blake to talk about diversion and housing placement work at Maskokamik. Yeah, but I don't think you'll have to click because I want to talk about the Indigenous ways and safety and security.
Hello. I'm probably more nervous than Glory to be up here. So anyways, so through collaboration, which in Edmonton we talk a lot about how collaboration is one of the most simple and easiest ways to decolonize. Native Counseling Services of Alberta partnered with Enoch Nation to ensure that the guests at Maskokamik were not only being treated great while accessing those services, but that we're also creating exit plans for them. So traditionally in Edmonton, when you had a shelter site or a large gathering space of people, emergency drop-in sites, housing teams would be put in there. And these housing teams, through Housing First, would act as referral sources only. So they would intake you, they'd do your SPDAT or your high-intensity referral, and then they'd refer you out and you'd wait until you got a housing worker attached to you. And so I don't think this was any kind of like really amazing kind of thinking. But we were like, why don't we do the work? We're right there. And so we put a 6-person team in. We had an Indigenous funder in Edmonton, which is new to us, Red Road Healing Society. And we worked with them to get 6 FTEs to support the people on site. So being on site ourselves, we could intake them. We could prioritize their needs, whether it be ID, healthcare, physical and mental health. and income sources and house them directly. Because we do know, and anybody who operates a Housing First team knows that you spend 3/4 of your day looking for your participants. And then if you do find them, you may have already missed the appointment that you were trying to get to, and you spend the rest of the day rebooking that appointment. And so having our guests on site every single day allows us to be very intentional with the work we do and get a lot achieved. And to date, we can boast that we have housed 130 people since January. Thank you. And it's through that collaboration, knowing that when we work with them, we don't have access to PATH yet in our city, but we certainly use a relational practice when engaging the people we're serving. No matter how they score on the BI Spit-At, we know that people lie, that they will continue to redo them until they get the housing placement we need. So we go through relational practice, we work with them on making sure that we're not here to judge the past. We're here to see what is best for moving forward. And that's, we can also boast 82% success rate in the housing that we have achieved. So that's long-term remaining housed continuously.
I also wanted to talk about just the Indigenous way of knowing and being and what we're doing with the society and at Maskokamik. 98% of our staff are Indigenous. Currently, right now, the stats are, since January, we have had 85% of Indigenous people come through Maskokamik. So, which is huge, because Indigenous people do not like to go to shelters. Which also brings me back to safety and security. So knowing that there is a safe space, and I've heard this from non-Indigenous people, is that we always call it moccasin news, right? We know it travels faster than internet. It's real fast. Maskokamik is a safe and clean place to be. So we're grateful that, the word on the street is that it's the place to be. I also want to mention that stats came in from EPS. We have the lowest calls anywhere in the city of Edmonton, and we have the lowest number of overdoses at our shelter in the city of Edmonton due to the relationships that we have from staff, the things that we do, the stuff that Blake was talking about. It's all relationship, right? Treat people the way you want to be treated. You give compassion, care when they're walking through those doors, no judgment, supporting them where they're at. So those are huge. Just doing those things have dropped down numbers significantly. Shout out to our security team. We third-party peerless protection, who are super trauma informed and are also relationship based. So again, we have some more quotes from guests. Just your efforts have had a profound impact on our lives, providing us with the means to rebuild and create a safer, more stable environment to our family. Your dedication to serving Indigenous communities is truly inspiring, and I'm deeply grateful to have had the opportunity to work with you and looking forward to the continued support. Once again, thank you for your unwavering support and advocacy. Your kindness will never be forgotten, and I will always hold you in the highest regard. Maskokamik guest. So these are just some pictures from Maskokamik, talking about the sacred spaces and ceremonies, offering a welcoming, not judgmental intake process, deinstitutionalized and decolonized, diversion and housing first. I would also like to ask Blake to provide a quick overview of some of the lessons we have learned. You may have already kind of done that, but we'll bring it back to you. And then, yeah. Did you want it? No? Yeah. Well, I think you pretty well shared it. Let me see here. At this point, we wanted to highlight how we have shared these lessons with the City of Edmonton with the goal of helping to spread them to other shelter operators in Edmonton, particularly non-Indigenous shelter providers. Also, what is a lesson on a shelter solutions by women and community members, right? Like the topic is women and community members. And here I am with these two guys, my bros. Munyawak. Jared's like, please welcome Jared Abbott from the City of Edmonton.
Thank you, Glory. So I wanted to start off by just saying how humbled that I am that Glory and Blake shared their amazing learnings from Maskokamik with me. This provided the City of Edmonton with the opportunity to highlight these learnings in the City of Edmonton's Emergency Shelter Best Practices Guide. So the unfortunate reality is that emergency shelters operate in a settler colonial system, and improvements to emergency shelters must sadly happen in a colonized environment. I hope my work in shining a spotlight on the tremendous work being done at Maskokamik is a small act of reconciliation within my area of influence, and will contribute to the uptake of some of these best practices in emergency shelters across the city and beyond, and encourage more Indigenous-informed shelter operations. So all of the lessons learned that Blake and Glory have went over were integrated into the City of Edmonton's Emergency Shelter Best Practices Guide. So for example, the sacred spaces and ceremony were included in the guest experience and services and programming sections. Ensuring that a site is welcoming was incorporated into the core operations section. In the built form considerations section, the various deinstitutional approaches were highlighted, and finally, diversion and housing first approaches were key elements of the core operations section. So the City of Edmonton's Emergency Shelter Best Practices Guide is an update from the previous City of Edmonton's Emergency Shelter Standards, which were put into place in 2021. So as the City of Edmonton doesn't fund or have any direct oversight over emergency shelter and provision in Edmonton, the Best Practices Guide acts to support the shelter system through a number of avenues. So first, it provides advice and recommendations to shelter providers on how they can improve the shelter design, the shelter operations, the programming that happens at a shelter site. Next, it acts as an aspirational set of shelter elements that operators can work towards in the future. And finally, as an informative tool for operators, key partners, as well as the City of Edmonton to advocate for better shelter improvements, increased funding, and to identify and communicate investment opportunities. So the structure of the Best Practices Guide focuses on 4 main areas. So there's guiding principles for shelter operators to consider. There's shelter physical space considerations, such as the shelter layout approaches and kind of best ways to organize the shelter space. There's core operations advice, which includes things like policies and procedures, site approaches, some more of the kind of the back of the house sorts of things, and then services and programming specific to certain population groups. And I'll now turn things back over to Glory to provide an overview of the key takeaways.
Thank you, Jared and Blake. The main takeaway today is that Indigenous-owned and operated shelter operations are finding success in Edmonton. If you are a shelter operator, here are a few things to keep in mind. Ensure your site embraces sacred spaces and ceremony, is welcoming and non-judgmental, has a deinstitutionalized and decolonized approach, and is diversion and housing first focused. Take the time to cultivate partnerships, as they will be key to your success. If you are with a municipality, we suggest that you develop your own shelter best practice guide and support a diversity of shelter operators, especially Indigenous. Nanan Skutaman, thank you very much.
Great presentations, a lot of good information, very inspiring. Gives us hope. We have time for some questions and answers, and we would ask that you utilize the microphone because the session is being recorded. And I'll have to ask my helper to help bring around a microphone. And if you want to direct it to any of the three presentations, just please indicate which presentation or general questions. Everybody's quiet, so they want to go home. Oh, here's a question.
Okay, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. Just very inspiring. I'm sorry, I don't know your name in the black.
Colleen.
Colleen. I've just asked, this is more of a personal thing. In the future, I'm going to be up in that area. Just wondering, is there a way to get involved? Yeah, I'm so inspired.
Oh, come on. I forgot to put it up there. I'm not tech savvy. We do have a link that you can, and emails that I can provide for you.
Okay.
Or anybody else.
And thank you to everyone, really, truly, yeah.
I believe all the presentations are going to be recorded, and perhaps on the website there's a QR code that I think all the links to all of the resources would be provided. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for that. It's so inspiring to hear all of these successes and like the work that you're all doing. It's just really beautiful. I guess this is for Colleen. I live in Kingston, Ontario, and I'm working at a pilot project right now to support folks transitioning out of homelessness. Mm-hmm. And part of our model is about social enterprise. And your organization also acts as a social enterprise, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is kind of a broad question. We've struggled a lot to have I guess we call them participants because it's a research study, but I really actually like how you said guests. I think I'm going to start using that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we've had a hard time getting our guests now to kind of participate in the social enterprise and be really involved, because I guess, you know, a lot of these individuals, it's not their first priority. Most of them are housed now. But how did you manage to, I guess, get people excited about the idea of social enterprise and actually get them to stick with it?
Oh, good question. So we had like this application intake just to kind of see what they were interested with Keepers of the Circle, because we offer all kinds of programs. Getting them excited, I guess you just have, like, stories are powerful. You have to tell them what the mission is. And talking to my trainees and telling them what we were up to and what they're tackling is the housing crisis. And who wouldn't want to be part of that? So I guess it's just a matter of talk, communication. Again, stories are powerful, and yeah, that's the best way I could say that. That's how I'm just talking to my people.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments, feedback?
My name's Marilyn Contoys, and actually I work for the Blood Tribe in Standoff, but I work in the city of Lethbridge at the Lethbridge Wellness Shelter and Stabilization Unit. So we're also an Indigenous-run shelter. There's a few things.
You guys are the first ones.
Yeah, we opened up in January of 2023. And as you know, like, we're not only is there a housing crisis, there is an opiate crisis. And what I'm observing where I work in the city of Lethbridge, and with the CBO, the community-based organization, and with Alberta Health Services, which is now Recovery Alberta, it feels like we're moving away from housing first approach to recovery focused approach. And that's really, there's good and there's bad. Not everybody wants to focus on their recovery. And I've noticed too, a lot of the permanent supportive housing that was in place is no longer in place, and those places are no longer operating since they've moved towards the recovery focused approach. How are you guys managing with all of that on your end, where you in Edmonton, and it's a bigger city too?
Hello. Yeah. So first, I just want to say thank you, because before we collaborated on opening up the Maskokamik shelter, we actually went down to Lethbridge and had a tour and sat with your leadership.
I actually remember you when you guys came to the shelter, and I recognize you actually. I'm one of the case managers there, and I love the work that we do. I love the work that you guys are doing, and I love what you two lovely ladies are doing as well on Turtle Island.
Yeah, so thank you for being so inviting to us, and we learned a lot from what you guys had started down there, and we took those lessons with us. Certainly we're in a housing crisis in the city of Edmonton, and thankfully so far we haven't lost any supportive housing. So the supportive housing that did exist prior to the Recovery Alberta has maintained. However, there is still a massive shortage of supportive housing compared to the population that requires it. I don't want to speak for everybody in the city of Edmonton, but I think of harm reduction and recovery in the sense that, if I'm supporting someone who is maybe sleeping in a bus shelter at night, every day they're waking up, they don't have safety in their lives, they can't feel safe, I'm going to take a harm reduction approach with them, because recovery is not realistic when you don't have tomorrow to look forward to. When you know that your average lifespan is around 45 to 48 years old when you're living rough. And so you're going to have to take a harm reduction approach to be realistic where somebody's at in their lives. But once I access supportive housing with the people we serve, or any kind of housing where we can maintain supports in their lives through housing teams, that's when we start talking about recovery. That's when we can start taking steps forward. And even then we wait till they feel safe, till they've expressed, I feel safe, I feel good, I'm ready for that step. That's when we can start working towards recovery. But we know historically if we push people into recovery, they'll do what we say for a certain amount of time because they think they should to keep receiving support, but that it's just going to spiral out of control.
Absolutely, and that's where I'm feeling frustrated with, it feels like it's being forced upon everybody when it's really frustrating, you guys, honestly, but thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. Yeah, we're doing all we can, and sometimes it's just keeping people alive, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's us too. And you guys are blessed. We have you guys are blessed down there, and she's got relations down south and in Enoch, but Esther Tailfeathers is like, I love that woman, and she talks about the continuum care model, right, from an Indigenous perspective. And yes, okay, recovery is a piece, but it's not everything. And we're talking about that continuum care model, right? So it's still, exactly, there's frustrations on our end too, but we're doing the best we can day by day, right? Ensuring and supporting people where they're at, right? If anything, we know as lived experience people, as frontline workers, managers, EDs, whatever, you can't force anybody to do anything, right? You support them where they're at, right? They have to have a say in their own lives, and we can't force them all into recovery, right? It's not realistic. So, stand together, for real. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, we'll pass the microphone here.
So my question would be directed to Jared from the city of Edmonton. How does the city get involved in helping in the crisis? Because we're from Montreal, and the city is, in my opinion, should be the biggest actor to help, and they're not doing much So I'm sorry if there's any colleague from the city of Montreal in here, but they're not doing much. So that's my reality.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. So I mean, during the pandemic, the city of Edmonton did step into the shelter space. We ran a couple of provided funding for a couple of shelters, provided funding for day spaces, those sorts of things. Right now, there's a political wrestling match going on with the province around what the jurisdiction is around shelter provision. And so the city has stepped away from directly providing any funding to emergency shelters and is now taking on more of an advocacy role, like through the best practices guide, to try and see improvements in the shelter system and to try and put pressure on the provincial government to provide more funding, which, I mean, as Glory had noted, we've seen quite a significant increase in shelter spaces. So I mean, there has been some wins on that advocacy front, but with just kind of the current fiscal situation in Edmonton, which is not great, the city's stepping back not only from providing support in this area, but in lots of other kind of social support areas, the city's cut funding. So yeah, it's not great.
I would have another question. I think it would be for Glory. You said that you hire 98% of your staff is Indigenous, so how do you do it?
I also want to note that some of the guests who have come through and now have their own places are actually staff at Maskokamik too. So it's like I said, it's creating community. So even the guests that stay there, because of community, they now have, by maybe going outside and picking up the garbage, or they're now helping handle the food, they have purpose, right? So, and they just continued on, and then we hired them. Being that we are a First Nations and the closest reserve to the city of Edmonton, we have a lot of our nation members that have come and worked. There is a lot of Indigenous people that want to do this type of work. What we're finding that it's more lived experience people that are coming, as opposed to people who have their degrees or their diplomas and that type of thing. So it's really knowing too, from like a manager perspective, who I hired a great manager. She has 30 plus years of experience, is knowing that when you're training and supervising people with lived experience, it's different than supervising somebody who has a degree or their BSW or whatever. So it's really knowing that. And I believe in Creator. I believe in the work that we do. And when I asked for guidance and protection in helping the people that walk in the doors of Maskokamik, I believe that meant like Creator was sending me good workers too. Because man, I can't do this alone. I have great support here. I have a great team. I have a great manager that I've hired, and they just keep coming. We have a list of people who want to work, and I think that the moccasin news, right, is that like it's a good place to work. So the people believe in what we're doing over there. It's it's like I said, it's not just a shelter, right? And I think that itself just spreads.
Interesting, thank you.
We have one more question here.
I was just going to say, I work with the elders team that Colleen works with, and we were asking the elders what they would put in a job description in terms of tasks and stuff like that. And the elders said, if you hire the right person, you don't need a job description because they know what to do. So that's that lived experience and the wisdom of the elders, eh? And then the final thing that I would sort of point out is, that lived expertise brings everything with it. And so I kind of feel, or at least have understood, that when most of the people I know work in a non-Indigenous shelter, it's the policy environment that kills them. they don't like it, they don't like working in rigid environments, and they're not going to work there, period, even if they don't say it out loud. And one final quote from an elder that I read just recently. He's a policy person with the Inuit groups up north, and he said, nothing screams colonization more than policies.
I think what we've seen here today is you've demonstrated a teaching, and one of those teachings that I've read and understood and tried to apply is that when you have a gift or you have a skill, you have a knowledge, it's your responsibility to share that with others and to allow others to utilize that information so that there can have a lasting impact on the community that we work with. So, Kachimigwich for your knowledge, your passion, your information, and your commitment to this work. So a round of applause again for Glory. Thank you, everyone.